The Quiet Decade. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with whispered conversations as representatives from 100 different species gathered for their annual security assessment. At the center of their discussion was a puzzling phenomenon that had emerged over the past decade: humanity's unprecedented withdrawal from military activities. Supreme Overseer Thax of the Vraxian Empire studied the holographic displays with his 4 eyes, each one focusing on different data streams. The numbers were clear. Human military expenditure had dropped by 89% across all colonies. Their warships had been converted into cargo vessels and research platforms. Their famous Marines, once feared throughout the galaxy, now spent their time building infrastructure and teaching in schools. This transformation is remarkable, chirped Ambassador Keelia of the Avian Confederacy, her feathers rustling with interest. 10 Earth years ago, humans possessed the 3rd largest military force in known space. Now they barely maintain defensive patrols. Thax's mandibles clicked dismissively, a species grown soft. Their warrior spirit has been diluted by comfort and prosperity. Look at their colonies now, gardens and museums where military bases once stood. The assessment continued with footage from various human worlds. New Eden loomed with vertical forests that climbed into the stratosphere. Titan Station had become the galaxy's premier center for xenobiology research. Even Mars, humanity's first colony and former military stronghold, had transformed its weapons factories into theaters and universities. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, her serene expression masking careful observation. She had anticipated this meeting, knowing that humanity's decade-long shift toward peace would eventually draw scrutiny. What the other species interpreted as weakness was, in reality, humanity's greatest demonstration of strength: the ability to choose peace when they possessed the power for war. As the council session progressed, Chen noted the predatory gleam in Thax's compound eyes. The Vraxian Empire had always been expansionist, held in check only by the threat of human military might. Now, with that deterrent seemingly gone, old ambitions stirred. "The data suggests," Thax announced, his voice carrying across the chamber, "that humanity has lost its edge. Their population focuses on art, science, and philosophy. Their young no longer train for combat. Their weapons lie dormant or dismantled." Chen stood slowly, commanding attention without raising her voice. "Supreme Overseer, you mistake evolution for weakness. Humanity has chosen to channel our energy into creation rather than destruction. We've discovered that the greatest strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to build." Her words were met with various reactions. Some species nodded approvingly, while others, particularly the more militant ones, showed skepticism. Thax's expression remained unreadable, but Chen caught the subtle communication between him and his military advisors. The following weeks saw increased Vraxian military movements near human space. Intelligence reports, carefully filtered through diplomatic channels, painted a clear picture. The Vraxian Empire was preparing for what they believed would be an easy conquest. Chen met with President Alexander Morrison via quantum communication from Earth. The president's face showed no concern, only quiet determination. "They've taken the bait," Morrison confirmed. 15 colonies report Vraxian scout activity. Their battle groups are massing near the Kepler corridor. "Should I warn them?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. "No. Let them believe what they wish to believe." Operation Silent Storm remains on schedule. 6 months after the Galactic Council meeting, the Vraxian Empire launched its offensive. Thax personally commanded the invasion fleet, confident in overwhelming the seemingly defenseless human colonies. The first wave targeted agricultural world Harmony Prime, expecting minimal resistance. The Vraxian dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons systems primed for rapid subjugation. Thax stood on his command bridge, savoring what he believed would be humanity's humiliation. "Scanning for defensive systems," reported his tactical officer. "Detecting nothing, Supreme Overseer. No military installations, no orbital platforms. No. Wait. The officer's confusion was understandable. Where sensors had shown empty space moments before, massive structures began to materialize. What appeared to be a peaceful space station revealed itself as a camouflaged battle platform. Asteroid mining facilities shed their disguises, exposing rows of weapon systems. Even the planet's weather satellites transformed, deploying energy shields that encompassed the entire world. Impossible. Thax roared. Our intelligence showed no military presence. Before his fleet could react, space itself seemed to come alive. Microdrones, no larger than insects and virtually undetectable, swarmed the Vraxian ships. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were disciplers, attaching to hull plates and systematically shutting down offensive systems without causing casualties. From the planet's surface, a transmission reached the Vraxian flagship. The image showed an elderly human man in simple civilian clothes, tending to a garden. He looked up at the camera with gentle eyes. "Supreme Overseer Thax," the man said calmly, continuing to water his plants. "I'm Governor James Wright of Harmony Prime. I used to be Admiral Wright, but I retired 10 years ago when we chose the path of peace. You seem to have misunderstood something fundamental about humanity." Thax watched in horror as his mighty dreadnoughts were rendered helpless, their weapon systems offline, their engines reduced to minimal function. No shots had been fired. No lives had been lost. Yet his invasion force was completely neutralized. "You see," Wright continued, setting down his watering can, "when humans choose peace, it's not because we've forgotten how to wage war. It's because we've mastered it so completely that we no longer need to demonstrate it. Every garden you see was designed by military engineers. Every museum was built with defensive capabilities. Every teacher was once a warrior who chose to nurture rather than destroy." Across human space, similar scenes unfolded. Vraxian forces encountered not traditional military resistance, but something far more sophisticated. A defense system so advanced it could disable entire fleets without violence. The humans had spent their decade of peace perfecting the art of non-lethal warfare, turning their entire civilization into a seamless blend of creation and protection. Back on Earth, President Morrison addressed the Galactic Council via emergency session. His words were measured, devoid of anger or triumph. For 10 years, humanity stepped back from military posturing. We chose to build rather than intimidate, to create rather than destroy. But make no mistake, our commitment to peace is backed by our mastery of war. We simply prefer not to use it. The assembled representatives watched footage of the Vraxian fleet being gently shepherded out of human space by automated systems. Not a single casualty had been inflicted on either side. The message was clear. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for traditional warfare, developing defensive capabilities that made offensive action obsolete. Ambassador Chen observed the reactions around the council chamber. Fear, respect, and wonder played across alien features as they grasped the implications. Humanity hadn't abandoned its military strength. It had transformed it into something far more powerful: the ability to defend without destroying, to defeat without killing. Thax's image appeared on the emergency communication channel, his compound eyes reflecting a mixture of humiliation and dawning respect. "We miscalculated," he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of his error. Morrison nodded graciously. "Supreme Overseer, we harbor no ill will. Your fleet will be escorted safely back to Vraxian space. We hope this experience leads to greater understanding between our peoples." The first part of humanity's revelation was complete. The galaxy had learned that human peace wasn't weakness. It was strength so absolute that it no longer needed to be displayed. But the true extent of humanity's evolution was yet to be revealed. As the Vraxian fleet began its journey home, their systems gradually restored by human technicians, strange readings appeared on long-range sensors. Something massive was moving in the depths of human space, something that had remained hidden even from their most sophisticated scanning technology. The sleeping giant hadn't just stirred, It was about to show the galaxy what humanity had truly been building during their decade of peace. The sleeping dragon awakens. The aftermath of the failed Vraxian invasion sent ripples through the Galactic Council. Species that had dismissed humanity's peaceful transition as weakness now scrambled to reassess their understanding. But it was the Corvethi hegemony, an alliance of warlike species even more aggressive than the Vraxians, who decided to test humanity's true capabilities. Unlike Thax, the Corvethi supreme warlord Zergith approached the situation with calculated brutality. The humans revealed a defensive capability. He growled to his war council, his chitinous armor reflecting the harsh lights of the command center. But defense alone cannot protect an empire. We will force them to show their offensive capabilities, or confirm they have none. The Corvethi strategy was simple yet devastating. Simultaneous attacks on 17 civilian targets across human space, forcing humanity to spread their defensive systems thin. Colony ships, research stations, and mining operations, all deliberately chosen for their minimal strategic value, but maximum psychological impact. Commander Marcus Vale stood in the hidden command center of Project Thunderstorm, humanity's most closely guarded secret. For 10 years, this facility had operated in the void between stars, undetectable and self-sufficient. Vale, like many of his generation, had volunteered to spend a decade in isolation, preparing for this moment. Corvethi battle groups have entered the engagement zones, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka. They're targeting civilians deliberately, Commander. They want to force our hand. Vale's scared face remained impassive. Unlike the polished diplomats and converted warriors the galaxy had seen, he represented humanity's hidden edge, those who had spent the peaceful decade honing their skills in absolute secrecy. Initialized Psionic Division, Vale ordered. It's deployed at 30% capacity. Let's show them why humans really stopped fighting conventional wars. Deep within the facility, 100 humans sat in meditation chambers, their minds linked through quantum entanglement technology. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of the Psionic Warfare Division, opened her eyes as the connection stabilized. Psionic net established, she reported. We have consciousness overlap with all Corvethi command vessels. The Corvethi hegemony prided itself on its warrior culture and mental fortitude. They were about to discover that humanity's decade of peace had been spent exploring the deepest frontiers of consciousness itself. Aboard the Corvethi flagship Deathbringer, Warlord Zergith prepared to give the order to fire on a human colony ship carrying 10,000 families. His claw reached for the command console and froze. Not physically. His body remained free, but his mind was suddenly elsewhere. He stood in a vast white space, facing a young human child who looked up at him with innocent eyes. "Why do you want to hurt us?" the child asked simply. Zergith tried to respond with typical Corvethi aggressive rhetoric, but found he couldn't lie. In this strange mental space, only truth existed. Because we fear what we don't understand," he heard himself say. "Your peace terrifies us more than your wars ever did." Across the Corvethi fleet, similar scenes unfolded. Hardened warriors found themselves in mental landscapes where violence was impossible, where they were forced to confront the reality of their actions, not through pain or coercion, but through an unprecedented expansion of empathy and understanding. Lieutenant Tanaka monitored the situation from Thunderstorm Command. All Corvethi vessels have ceased offensive actions. Psionic Division reports full success. Non-violent consciousness intervention achieved across all targets. Vale nodded, then turned to his communications officer. Phase 2. Deploy the deterrent. From the void between star systems, structures began to emerge that defied conventional understanding. These weren't ships or stations, but something entirely new, constructs that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humanity had discovered during their peaceful decade. The galaxy watched in awe as these impossible structures materialized. Each one was unique, resembling crystalline flowers blooming in space, their fractal patterns constantly shifting. They were beautiful, mesmerizing, and utterly alien to anything previously seen in human technology. Professor David Kim, broadcasting from one of these constructs, explained to the stunned Galactic Council, "During our decade of peace, humanity didn't abandon military research. We transcended it. These are dimensional resonance arrays, defensive systems that operate by harmonizing with the quantum substrate of space itself. They can create zones of absolute peace where violent action becomes physically impossible." The demonstration was subtle but profound. As the arrays activated, weapons across entire star systems simply stopped working. Not through damage or interference, but because the fundamental physics in those regions no longer permitted destructive energy transfers. The Korvathi fleet, like the Vraxians before them, found themselves helpless but unharmed. More troubling for their warrior culture, they found themselves experiencing unprecedented clarity of thought and emotion. The psionic intervention hadn't brainwashed them. It had temporarily removed the psychological barriers that prevented true empathy. Warlord Zergith's voice crackled across communication channels, weak with the weight of realization. I understand now. Your species didn't stop being warriors. You became something beyond warriors. You found power in peace itself." Commander Vale authorized the final revelation. From Earth's moon, a transmission began, not of data or images, but of pure experience. Every being with compatible consciousness in the galaxy suddenly shared a moment of human collective memory. The decision, made 10 years ago, to walk away from traditional warfare. They felt the debates, the fears, the tremendous courage it took for a species that had survived through conflict to choose vulnerability. They experienced the joy of creation, the satisfaction of problems solved without violence, the profound strength found in restraint. Ambassador Chen, still in the Galactic Council chambers, stood to address the assembly. 10 years ago, humanity made a choice, not because we had to, but because we could. We mastered war so completely that we could finally see beyond it. Every garden we planted, every school we built, every moment of peace we chose, all were backed by the certainty that we could defend them if needed. She paused, letting her words sink in. But more importantly, we discovered that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy enemies, but in the power to transform them into friends. The Korvathi fleet will be escorted home, their crews returned safely. We hope they carry with them a new understanding. The dimensional resonance arrays began to fade back into their hidden dimensions, but their impact remained. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. A species that had evolved beyond the need for traditional power projection, developing defensive capabilities that made offensive warfare obsolete. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. The Vraxian Empire proposed a joint research initiative with humanity. The Korvathi hegemony began dismantling their own military-industrial complex, seeking to follow humanity's path. Even traditionally peaceful species found new courage to stand against aggression, knowing that humanity's invisible shield extended to those who chose peace. President Morrison addressed Earth and all human colonies in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. "We showed the galaxy that the mightiest warriors are those who can choose not to fight, that the greatest weapons are those that never need to be used, that the strongest species are those who lift others up rather than tear them down." Back at Thunderstorm Command, Commander Vale watched as the facility began its transition. No longer needed as a hidden military installation, it would become a center for teaching other species the principles of transcendent defense. "Sir," Lieutenant Tanaka reported, "we're receiving requests from 37 species for cultural exchange programs. They want to understand how we did it, how we turned 10 years of peace into a permanent advantage." Vale smiled, the first genuine expression of joy he'd allowed himself in a decade. "Tell them we'll teach anyone willing to learn. The galaxy is ready for a new definition of strength." As he spoke, children on 100 human worlds played in gardens where weapons were once stored, learned in schools where barracks once stood, and dreamed of futures unlimited by the fear of war. The seeds planted during humanity's decade of peace had bloomed into something beautiful and terrible, a power so complete it no longer needed to be exercised. The sleeping dragon hadn't just awakened. It had evolved into something far more magnificent, a guardian that protected through presence alone, a teacher that fought ignorance instead of enemies, a species that had finally grown into its full potential. And across the galaxy, former warriors looked at their weapons with new eyes, wondering if they too might find the courage to walk humanity's path, to become mighty enough to choose peace, strong enough to show mercy, and wise enough to know that the greatest victories are those where everyone wins. The story of humanity's transformation spread throughout the cosmos, becoming legend. But for humans themselves, it was simply Tuesday, another day of tending gardens, teaching children, and quietly maintaining the invisible shield that protected all who chose peace over war. The giants hadn't fallen silent after all. They had learned to speak in a language more powerful than any roar, the whisper of compassion backed by the certainty of absolute strength, and the galaxy, at last, was listening.